Hi friends, welcome to episode 39. Last week we got a hell of a lot done in episode 38 if you watch that one, and I went home from here feeling really quite upbeat about everything. But it just goes to show it's all the prep, unfortunately. It's the prep that takes the time, which makes things look painfully slow. But I think the cab really now, mid-October, is coming together, and I'm almost ready now to start working on the area around the engine and that front wing. The front wing is terribly distorted, and there's obviously, I think, some evidence of some previous accident damage on the front of the bus as well. So anyway, let's see how we get on with this weekend's episode. Sit back, enjoy, and let's get on with this. Right, hello friends. It's very difficult now to follow up on the success of last week, and Saturday really was doing all the little fiddly bits. There's still some items of snagging which I'll need to do, but I'll do those over a period of time because there's no urgency for them now, so I can pick them up later on as we go along. So Sunday, which we'll come to later on, we started a whole new era, a whole new project of taking out the near side of the bus. So anyway, let's crack on with Saturday. Right, last week I wasn't happy with this little cover that sat on the regulator box. It picks up a hell of a lot of dust. So I rubbed it back down again and repainted it. Just one of those little jobs that you have to keep doing. It's really annoying, but there's so much dust in that shed. It's it kind of spoils things a bit. But anyway, that is done, and now that's ready to go back on the regulator box. This also took up a colossal amount of my time. I had to run the edging. There's a rubber edging that goes round the outside. So if you look at that as a sort of a U shape, forget the bottom bit, but that runs from left across the top and then down on the right hand side requires the same rubber as the front windscreen. And that was a mare because I wanted to do it in one complete piece. So run time on that was probably about 2 and a bit hours. So it just goes to show how long it takes to do things. And I tried really hard with that. I heated the rubber up, put it in a hot bucket. But of course, by the time you've gone sort of 20 minutes or so, the thing's freezing cold again. But anyway, that's done. But I can't put it back in the bus because the work I'm going to start on Sunday, this is going to get in the way. So I can't put it back in at the moment. So that's going to go back up the back of the shed. Right, you might recall I managed to successfully put the transfers on the brown bit just underneath this bit of conduit and the horn and switch thing, basically for the dip switch for the headlights. And the speedo. Now I've got some smaller ones to do, which is the double deck and then the height, which goes on the bulkhead at the front, just as the driver's looking upwards. And the emergency exit one. I did find there was a problem though with the weight transfer, which goes just on the back bulkhead. I made a bit of a mess of it. Basically, the other two transfers are much thicker lettering, and I'd used the same sort of technique with the weight one, which is really thin, very tiny. And unfortunately it dried out before I got a chance to apply it. The other two hadn't dried out, so they went on quite nicely, but sadly the weight transfer was spoiled and I'll have to come back and do that again at some point in the future, but in no particular rush at the moment now. Right, so just very quickly, here's the two transfers. Transfers are supplied, as I put on there, by our friends at Squirrel Preservation. Give them a shout if you want some of these. Right, typically there was something else I needed to do, and that was to fit this footwell. I'd sprayed it ages ago, but I needed to get it in, although it wasn't going to go back without a fight. Now, once again, as I said before, these simple things look like they'll only take a few minutes, but this didn't take a few minutes. This actually took probably about an hour and a half, maybe, just to get a few simple screws in. Luckily, this is a nice little job where I can pull up a chair and sit down and do it all on a chair. It's far better than actually trying to clamber in the cab. Now I put everything back in the cab, it's practically impossible to work in there. But anyway, so this is the driver's footwell. And it's got an additional feature, which I'll come to in a minute, that probably didn't have this originally, but as you can see, there's a little additional panel there. All RTs, I believe, have got that additional panel, but there isn't anything in it, and I'll come to it in a minute. But the problem was, when I built this back up again, having paint stripped it and sprayed it several times, I put all the screws back in, and unfortunately, I think it was that bit of wood that you can just see there was missing when I did it, so I reinstated that bit of wood, and now of course with that bit of wood in the way it won't fit. And the reason it won't fit is two of the screws on the top of that that panel you see just below my hand there should have been wood screws, and I'd actually used the machine screws and nuts, so they were fouling on that wood, so I ended up having to take that away and remove those two top screws. But that wasn't a problem. But it did take for ages, because the other problem with this, largely, I think down one side, I think down the bottom, I'd used the original wood. I hadn't replaced it. As you can see, there's original wood down the bottom there, and lining the screws up was proving to be rather difficult, because whenever you got old holes that screws went into previously, sometimes the screws shear off when you're taking them out. Sometimes they just rotted away, and you have to put doweling in and stuff like that. So it proved a bit of a problem. So anyway, let me show you what this unusual feature is on this RT. Right, so while I get on with that, if you take a look at the inserted picture, you'll notice that there's a little square panel just below the driver's footwell. Now, it really was quite an advanced feature, and it certainly was on pre-war RTs, and this is where I got this one from. There was a pre-war RT that was being broke up where I was years ago, and I could see virtually all of its unique features going in a skip, and I thought I'll save that. So I retained it. What it is it's something that became almost standard on all buses from probably about the 1980s onwards. And it's a thing called a battery boost socket. What you do is, when the batteries are feeling a little bit less energetic and the bus needs a bit of assistance, what we do is we have a thing called a battery boost sort of units. Basically, I think they're very similar to aircraft batteries, basically what they are, and you carry them around the workshop or wherever you want to go. Yeah, you can see I've got fed up with it now, like I can't work it out. Why on earth is that not working? Yeah, I think it's those two screws there that are making a mess. Luckily I can speed all this up later on, so you don't have to sit for all this nonsense. But anyway, yeah, right, so that boost socket was fitted certainly from the pre-war RT. So what you would do is when you're you're out on the road, you simply plug in this this special unit that goes in there. It's like a little it's like basically a big connector. So you plug into that, into the boost socket unit, which I think, and I had seen a picture of an RT having this boosted at Chiswick. Well, it was boosted at Chiswick, if you see what I mean, but it was one of the London Transport Museum photos, and I've gone through their online archive to try and see if I can find another picture, but I can't. But I've certainly seen it in a book somewhere, this boost socket actually being used in anger. Now, when I had this originally, the way of boosting it was to use these crocodile clips. Now, the problem with crocodile clips is when you've got a you're in the dark, you're in the shed, it's not very well lit, and you're trying to prod around in there with crocodile clips, it's very, very easy to get the wrong polarity and make a complete mess of things. So at least by doing this with this socket, you can pretty much guarantee you can't make a mess of it. And they're so simple. As I said, all you have to do basically is plug something in there, plug it into the unit, and away you go. So fantastic little device, and it was certainly well in advance of its years. The Route Masters only got them when they started doing the refurbishment process, probably at the end of the mid-90s. They started putting them in towards the back by the staircase, which is very close to the batteries. Right, so really little advanced feature on the RT. I mean, I know I've said before that the RM is so many steps forward from the RT, and it is. It's definitely took in a lot of the shortcomings, perhaps that's the word I meant. But I know people love RTs, and so do I. But the Routemaster was so far advanced. But strangely, they didn't follow on with this little boost socket. The socket itself is completely different to the ones we use on modern buses. They're much more robust things. But this looked like it was quite a small affair, basically. But anyway, yeah. So I'll leave it to you to look it up online if you're really interested in it. I'm sure there's that photograph somewhere, and I'm sure someone might actually help point out where it is, and I'll post it on here in a future edition. Right, so having fixed this thing, let's get back on with the rest of the bus. Right, so there we go. After all that effort, there is a stepwell finally in. And it does go to show how long it takes to do these things. But yeah, there we go. And the other bit, which is this bit here, I can point with my finger. I can probably also do it electronically on the video. That bit there, that panel, as I explained last week, I'm going to leave that off because it's got access to the wires and things. So I don't really want to plug that hole because it's going to be impossible to get to those wires with the panels in place. So yeah, a little bit more progress there. Although, as I said, these things do take ages, a lot longer than you imagine they do. There's only a few screws there, but you know that took quite a long time to achieve. Hurrah! I was so pleased to be able to move on from that. So Sunday morning dawned. Having dealt with the cab over the last God knows how many months, I've lost track and lost the will to live. But having done that, it was now time to make a start on the area around the engine. I'd already done that canopy area, which you might remember I did that before I took the cab out. But now it was the turn of the area around the engine. So before I do that, I've got to put one of the wheels back on the back of the bus, mainly because I need those wooden blocks you see in picture, and also that old wheel rim there. The wheel rim is just acting as a safety mechanism just in case the wooden blocks give way, but they're not likely to. There's one of them, I think, is an old railway sleeper, a Jarrow wood. They're as good as gold, they won't go anywhere. So anyway, yeah, that was holding up the offside of the RT. And I needed access to that area because I was running the cables to the batteries, and they go just across the top of the wheel arch there from just underneath where that spring is. So yeah, I needed to keep access. So what I did was I only popped one wheel back on. I'll show you me doing that. Okay, with a deep intake of breath, we're going to get started on the near side of the RT. Now, I've never really ventured into here, so it was a bit of a learning curve for me to find out, you know, what fits and how it fits. There were a few things that a cursory look over had showed that might be a problem going forward in the future. And when we get to them, I'll show you what they are. But the first thing I did was to start to remove that little side light. My friend Brian Watkinson told me that this area of the RT is a known rust bucket area, especially around that handle you see just up there, and this has got signs of bubbling. So if I can, I might, because I've got the interior out, if I can access the other side of that handle, hopefully it's a couple of screws with nuts on the back, then I'll remove that, and that'll give me access to getting off the crusty looking paint that's there, as well as probably that bit of beading. That bit of beading would be quite easy to replace. But yeah, we don't know what the wood situation is like behind it, and I have been warned by another RT owner, just do not venture behind there. But anyway, so yeah, so let's have a look at this lamp. Right, here it is close up. And as you can see, it's had like a high tide watermark in there. I mean, yeah, you can see it really clearly, can't you? That's obviously at some point has filled up with water. And yeah, there's nowhere to go. I imagine it's slowly evaporated away. But yeah, so this is a problem with the RTs. They do have water ingress issues. That bottom screw was an absolute sod to get out, so I had to work away at it, and I managed to do it. I can't remember what I did. I might have Dremeled it or something. I can't remember what I did now. Yeah, so removed that those 4 screws. Now the whole unit's ready to come out, but it's still wired in. It's not wired into anything electrical because I've isolated everything, so I can just snip the wires off when I'm ready. But yeah, there's, I think, one of the wires in there. There's 2 go in one side and 1 comes in the other. One I think is the feed for the lamp, and then the other 2 I think are negatives, if I remember rightly. I'll have to remember what they were. The problem with the wiring on these is they used whatever colour they had available. So you can have lots of black wires, lots of red wires, and the red wires can sometimes be negative wires, and the black wires can, by process of elimination, can sometimes be positive wires. So what I've tried to do is, as I've rewired this, I've used a whole variety of different colours, and it's made fault finding much easier, because I know the purple wire does this and the green wire does that. You know what I mean? So the yellow wire does the indicators on one side. So so basically by colour coding them, it's made life a lot simpler for me. But if I just did them all as black or red or whatever, it just wouldn't work for me. So that's going to come off. That's still on the bus as we speak, midweek. That will come off, and that would obviously be done just like I did the other side. And that bit of beading you see going sort of up, right, and then the one that runs across, they're also coming off. Right, I spotted this as a potential problem, and you may wonder, what on earth is it? What it is, on the left hand side of shot, you've got the radiator, and on the right you've got a gap where the bonnet was. Now that chuntering away there, that sort of line down the middle of the radiator, that is where the bonnet has been misfitting over many years. And what it's done is it's cut a groove into the radiator, and I was looking at it before I started stripping everything down and puzzling as to what is wrong. If you also have a look at that green panel just below, you notice the gap starts wide at the top and then narrows down. It does the same further on down. It's almost touching on the rad. So something is badly out of line. My first thought was the radiator might actually be projected too far back into the body of the bus. And then my second thought was maybe the actual bonnet itself was misaligned somehow, so it was maybe sort of, I don't know, lower at the back than it should be. Maybe by jacking it up a little bit at one end, it might well straighten that up. So that is a job I'm going to have to look at, but I'm not going to be able to lose that that stuff. It's not, so it's aluminium, so it's not something you just chuck a load of polyfiller in, if you see what I mean, and then hope it goes away, because it's not going to go away. It's going to be visible for the rest of that radiator's life, basically. Okay, while we're on the subject of things that are going to need dealing with, as you can see on those two screws, particularly the one nearest the camera, RT disease. What it is a bit of wood behind there, and again, another thing I've been warned about, they rot away. That's just underneath the emergency exit window, which is why I can't put the emergency exit window in, because I'm going to have to remove this part. So as I say, it supports the bottom of the emergency exit window, so that's got to come out, and I'll paint strip that. But I don't know quite what that fibre stuff is in there. It's a bit like asbestos or something like that. I'm not quite sure what it is, and I need to probably renew that if I can find something similar. And you also notice those two holes in the side bulkhead. Unfortunately, that's where it would have said RT whatever it was, not the number but the actual the body code. So at some point in its life someone's swiped that, which is a great shame, but there we are. So yeah, so that's got to come off, and I'll do that as a little future job as we start stripping this down. Right, what I need to do now is to take off that nut guard. That's that circular thing that sits around there. It's only held on by 3 bolts, and as luck would have it, they were quite simple to get out. The idea of that is it's to protect people getting bashed by the wheel nuts. But I was thinking about this, because I can speed it up, thankfully. I was thinking about this. When you consider modern buses, the idea of a modern bus, and even a modern car, is that if you come into contact with it, like a pedestrian, you step out and get walloped by the bus. The idea is that the design of the vehicle is to push you away from the vehicle. When you look at that mudguard and you look at that wheel, if you stepped out in front of that bus, there's only one place you're going, and that's under that wheel. So by today's terms, they'll be absolutely lethal to have something like that you can, you can easily go underneath the bus. And I think that your chances of survival are quite low, because they're, about 3 ton on that wheel maybe. So yes, I wouldn't recommend it, obviously, trying it. Okay, so having removed the little nut guard on there, next thing I'll do is get these wheel nuts off. And the bus is, although partly jacked up, that lovely old jack, it's Draper. I showed one of my colleagues at work this picture of this jack, and he was quite impressed. So the bus is only slightly jacked up. It's not. It's sufficient that the friction on the wheel is on the ground, so it's still a few pounds, or half a ton or whatever, still sitting on the wheel. But anyway, yeah. So these wheel nuts have been on for ages, and they are really tight. And as you can see, I've got to use a scaffold pole on the end of the wheel brace, and you sometimes think the damn thing's going to snap, but there we go. And I think one of those was going to pose me a little bit of a problem. But as luck would have it, my good friend Mark Davis actually had this wheel brace, so I couldn't find it. I was looking for my one, looking all over the barn for it and couldn't find it. Any minute now we're going to have a bang. Watch. There you go. A little bang. So that one's sorted. Right, anyway, yeah, now you may notice that it looks like I'm tightening the wheel nuts up. I'm not. The RT and RM are handed. So the near side go one way and the other side go the other way. Now what it is I mean, there is a thing called, they call it the wheel loss mystery, where wheel nuts come loose and then the wheel departs from the bus. It's a terrible thing to happen, and it does happen, unfortunately. But what you do with these, oh, here's my jack. Look, I showed this to my colleague, and he was a little bit surprised. He's never seen anything like that. But I'll tell you what, that thing is as safe as houses. I wouldn't necessarily go under a bus without a secondary sort of means of escape. I normally put a big block of wood or something underneath. But this thing just is not going to fail. But it's a lovely bit of kit. But anyway, I'll get back to those wheels nuts if I can. Yeah, so back on the wheel nuts. The wheel nuts tighten as the bus is going forward. So in other words, if the wheel turns clockwise, undoing the wheel nuts, sorry about the shaky video, it was me trying to set the camera up. So the wheel goes clockwise, then the nuts go anti-clockwise and vice versa. So they actually sort of, if anything, start to tighten themselves up. Now I've got one wheel nut still on there. It's one of my little things. I've jacked the bus up, as you can see. It's just slightly off the ground. I need to take it up a little bit more for some reason. I can't remember what I did. I think it was crashing on the floor. I think there's a bit of friction in there because the wheel hasn't turned for so long. So yeah, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that classic mistake of turning it the wrong way. No, see, it doesn't go that way. It goes the other way. There you go. See what I mean? A classic mistake, and we all do it. So yeah, so that's how it works. So your wheel nuts go the other way, and it does mean also you must keep those wheel nuts separate. Because if you try and put them on the wrong side, then it causes problems. I sling them in these little plastic tubs I've got, and I put all these, there's a load of little tubs that lay around with all the screws and the nuts and bolts that come off. It's quite heavy for me. One of my colleagues was bouncing tyres about on rims the other day, and he was doing a fantastic job of it. But yeah, that's quite heavy. So there we are. There is exposed for the first time in God knows how long the inner wing. So we're now going to start stripping all this out. Okay, so by a process of abracadabra or whatever, or lots of swear words, the front wing has been removed, and it exposes this. There's a little tray that holds that wing, and that wing was severely out of line. And you can have a look here. It's been bashed God knows how many times. There's bashes at the top, bashes at the bottom, bashing around the side. I mean, that really has been through the wars. Now, that was quite easy to take off because it's just structured onto a pillar just at the side around the back of the headlight. So I managed to remove all of that. It was a piece of cake doing that. And what I'll do is, while it's on the floor, I'll hammer it with a large hammer and see if I can knock all those corners out. But the original wing protruded quite a bit out of the line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a line off of the back of the wheel arch, and I'll get that sort of circular mark settled up or drawn up or whatever, and then I'll use it as a template to get that wing back in place to see if I can get it a little bit more circular. It wasn't circular before, it was awful. So anyway, and then you can also see on the other side, you can see the other part of the inner wing, that little black bit there. I need to remove that as well. That came out on Sunday afternoon. And the two headlamps, the headlamp and the fog lamp, they came out. They were wired in rather uniquely, using a piece of new conduit, which I was quite surprised of. So when they did the double dip, They wired in some new conduit, which was very nice of them, and left the old conduit in situ and just clipped it on. Now I know, and hopefully I've got a picture of this. Someone's going to say, oh, that's wrong, it's a bodge. It's not actually. It's done all the time in modern buses, because with modern buses you have to put in new cam lines, and the electrician just come around with a, you know, I don't know, 30 odd foot of cable, and they just clip it onto where the old one was and take the connectors off each end and plug it in, and the bus is sorted. So that's how we get away with things now. So in many respects, what they did with this double dip headlight thing was very similar to what we do today. The only thing I didn't think much of is when it went through the bulkhead into the saloon, they didn't do any protection for the cables. So that means the cables could rub against the bulkhead and eventually cause a short circuit. So I don't think they were too bothered, probably the age of the vehicle. They probably thought, well, if we have a short circuit and if we blow all the fuses on the bus, we'll just send it off to the Barnsley scrap yards. So I suppose they weren't too bothered about it, they just got the job done. Okay, so before we move off of this, this is the inner wheel arch, and you can see how rusty and manky it is. We'll come to that in a minute, but what we're now going to do is we've got to get that bonnet off, and it is really heavy, so I need a little bit of assistance. As luck would have it, my two friends Peter Veers and Mark Davis were on hand to assist. So yeah, let's get this bonnet off, shall we? So what we're going to do, we're going to take the bonnet off. I've undone all the screws and things. The only thing that's questionable is the far end. Yeah, there's a bolts on it there, Mark, so we'll try not to disturb it, and then I'll put them back. But what I've done is this end is all undone, but I've got one bolt over in that corner, which I think is going to stay. So what I might do is, if beware obviously who's jumping in there, but if someone can jump in there, I've undone that stay, unless you want to come up this end and I'll try that end. You come up this end and I'll go up this end, because this might be the more troublesome bit. So if we can just lift it and see if she'll come out.
Say when you're ready, Dave.
Yeah, go on then. Wow, there she goes, done.
I've got this end.
Right.
On the line.
I'll get rid of this plank of wood. It's no longer needed. Anyway, you like, really, as long as it's not over your bit.
Yeah.
Right, there's, look, it's Lincoln Green under there.
Careful where you watch. That's it.
Right, okay, we just put her down on the floor. Yeah, just put her down on the floor. Just stand it up.
Mind your feet.
That's it, well done. That, what?
Oh, I just thought in case it's going to fall. No, this seems all right.
Well, that's Lincoln Green, look.
Lovely.
Right, okay. Right, so there we are. So while we ponder the fact that it's Lincoln Green underneath the bonnet, I did actually have an idea. I went home thinking about this. I might spray the inside of the bonnet in Lincoln Green and the top of the bonnet obviously in the NBC colours, because you know, that's what we see. But obviously when they painted NBC, they never sprayed underneath the bonnet, which I can understand fully. So wouldn't it be nice just to give a little nod to the fact that the bus has spent most of its life in Lincoln Green. It was only in the last few months it ended up in this NBC green. So yeah, so I'll do that under the bonnet, if I can find my Lincoln Green paint. Lincoln Green. Right, luckily I can speed my way through this one through the powers of video, whatever it is, cleverness. This is the inner wheel arch that I mentioned earlier on that I pointed out. Some wood screws have been removed. Just need to get the paint off those two bolts. There were two similar ones on the other side actually, on the other wheel arch. So yeah, just clean that off and whip that off. So as I said before, thankfully due to the ability to speed stuff up, we can get this done really quickly. So whip that off. Now next week I will clean this all off, remove all the paint that's on there, take it back to bare steel. I think this is steel, not alley. Take it back to bare steel and respray both sides of it, and it'll be just like the other one, all nice and tidy. So there we are, that's the inner wheel arch coming off there. Right, so there we are, Sunday night, close of play, about 8 o'clock in the evening. I stayed a bit later. Last thing I need to do before I go home is to spray the chassis and underneath there and around the engine with some gunk. Gunk breaks down oil and grease and everything, and then what I'm going to do next weekend is I'll get the jet wash out and I'll jet wash this all off, so I'll make it as clean as I possibly can, before I start to do any other work on it. I really hate getting filthy dirty, and you're going to get absolutely filthy dirty doing this, but I'll get as much of the dirt, muck and detritus off that I possibly can. So there we are. So that was day one of starting on the near side of the RT. Once this is completed, and I hope it's not going to take as long as it to the cab. No, I absolutely it won't. I'm hoping that by Christmas this will be over and done with. I'm going to link in some other bits and pieces as well, because I want to do those cables to the back that you saw earlier on when I was just putting one wheel back on. So I really want to complete that. And perhaps with all this stuff off, I might even attempt to start the bus up, but it hasn't been started up for ages, so that will be fun. So there we are. Thanks very much for watching. Stick with us for hopefully the next episode. I'm going to do a special one on the colour of the ceiling, and while I was doing this, I've found a few more things. I actually did that video, episode 40, and then I've found another couple of pictures which have thrown even more doubt on whether we're doing it in the right colour. So yeah, I'll put that one out a couple of days after I've put this one out. So thanks very much everyone, stick around, and here's some more that YouTube reckon you should watch.